All right, let's talk about apophenia, or pattern recognition bias. This is another kind of cognitive bias that treasure hunters find themselves slipping into. But again, one of the reasons why I like treasure hunts is because these are lessons that we can learn and use in all of our life and work and learning in different areas. Apophenia means to bring forth something that doesn't quite match reality. So apophenia is noticing patterns where they don't really exist. And we've all experienced this in some measure in our lives. In fact, I can think of, in this very room where I'm sitting right now, I can think of an instance where I thought that we had a mouse. So behind these curtains, I have these shelves that are sitting there. And I looked on one of my shelves and I have some of my electronics equipment and so forth sitting there. And I saw these little black spots. And I have had an issue with rodents in a prior house that I lived in before, and I was convincing myself this is absolutely, we have a mouse. And then I started looking around and I started seeing some paper that was kind of torn up in a spot. Now, granted, the paper that was torn up was literally, I had torn that paper up several days before when I was unwrapping a package that I'd ordered and had been delivered. But I began to see a number of things, and I kind of disregarded the fact that those really weren't further evidence that there was a mouse or anything like that. I was just beginning to see, I had developed this little bit of theory, and now I was just noticing patterns and evidence where it didn't exactly exist. Now, we've had this happen also. Maybe you had it happen when you were alone at night and you started hearing things in the house, and the sounds began to lead you to believe that there was someone out there to get you, or you were a child and you were afraid that it was a ghost or a monster or something like that. We all have experienced different kinds of apophenia or this pattern recognition where the patterns don't really exist. But we experience it in our life all the time, and we don't always notice it. Cognitive biases are just a part of being human, and we grapple with them. So part of the issue is just acknowledging that, yes, we all will fall into these cognitive biases at times, including this pattern recognition overdrive, where you're just seeing too many patterns. But we can find some ways to work our way through them. By the way, this kind of pattern recognition overdrive is exactly what leads to things like conspiracy theories and superstitions and other kinds of thinking, where you start to see all of this evidence. When you begin to look at people telling stories of all sorts of conspiracies and Bigfoot or whatever else it might be, you'll often see that they identify so many patterns that there's a lot of detailed pattern that they've developed to kind of tell this story and convince themselves. Now, I'm not saying it's true or not true. I'm just saying that there can be pattern recognition overdrive or apophenia that gets in the way of following the real clues and seeing what's true or what's not true. So here are 5 ways that I've found in my own experience, and then also I've done a little bit of reading on some of the journals about confirmation bias and about apophenia in particular. Here are some of the ways that have been proven to help you work your way through this pattern recognition overdrive. So first one is pause pattern assumption. So ask, is there independent evidence of this pattern that matters, or am I guessing? So while we want to look for patterns and we're looking for these different clues and all, really try to look at each one independently and assess and evaluate it and really kind of interrogate that clue. So for example, when I thought that I had a mouse, by the way, the explanation, those droppings were actually not mice. They were small bugs that had been caught by a spider that was in a web up above, and the spider had kind of wound around the bug, and then it dropped from the web, and you could see the spider above, and it was actually winding up a bug at the time. And my son actually noticed this because he didn't come into it with the same bias that I did. So Really interrogate that one clue and look around, and don't force yourself into a theory or assumption, and look around for all sorts of possibilities. And when I saw the torn paper, I could have paused and noticed, oh wait, that torn paper is sitting in a box that I just opened, and I tore that paper 3 days ago, right? So that's a big key is you can do kind of a clue by clue, really deep assessment, looking at it from multiple angles before you start putting them all together and seeing if maybe they're just kind of independent of one another. The second one is one that you'll hear with a lot of these cognitive bias kinds of strategies, which is seek peer review. Seek review or feedback from another person. Another person can often spot patterns that are really forced or overly motivated by your emotional attachment or something like that. So you want to seek another person that looks at it and they'll say, it's, and that's, by the way, isn't that what happens sometimes when there's one person that thinks that there's someone in the basement and another person says, well, I'm pretty sure that was the heater that just kicked on. Right. So seeking that kind of peer review. It doesn't mean that you're wrong, doesn't mean that you're right. It just means that you're getting some alternate challenging perspectives, and that is healthy for overcoming cognitive biases of all types. The third one is check for designer intent. So this is a great one, especially in treasure hunt kinds of situation. This doesn't apply to everything, but sometimes we develop this overdrive of all of these clues that are kind of leading a direction. And then you give yourself and say, okay, what are the chances that this person really intended that? Is that person even capable of doing that level of deep thinking? This is where conspiracy theories sometimes come into play. I'm actually convinced, I do believe that there are some things out there that maybe you could call a conspiracy theory, but they actually happen, and they've actually happened. But in other cases, what we think is some grand mystery of some secret group of brilliant people could have actually been incompetence, or it could have been unintended. And so oftentimes we really force yourself to think about the designer's intent. Who is the designer? What are their capabilities? What's their way of thinking? Getting yourself in the mind of the designer and really looking to see if there's some kind of structure. Because good treasure hunts, for example, have layered clues and there's structure to them, but it's not some kind of yes, there can be some that are really ornate and detailed, but usually it's a much more elegant and simple structure than you realize at first. I'll just keep that in mind. So if you're getting really out there making all these wild connections from studying all these various history sources, you're probably jumping a little bit into this overdrive. Fourth one is separate emotion from logic. The thrill of seeing something and having an idea of a solution is not evidence that you're right. And let me say that again. The thrill and the emotion of having an aha moment of a possibility, a possible solution, that is actually not evidence that you're right. And so slow down on your interpretation is what we do with this and separating your emotion and your logic. And I'll probably do another video, maybe a couple of videos on this, but as someone that's studied at 12, 13 different universities, picked up a few graduate degrees and undergraduate degrees, I've spent a lot of time in learning in university settings and things like that. And one thing that I've found that has allowed me to set myself apart in work on occasion is to be dispassionate about a subject. To be dispassionate. While we have a world that celebrates, or at least in the United States, there's a real elevation and celebration of emotion and being emotionally attached to something, that actually in trying to solve problems, sometimes you want to be dispassionate. You want to kind of detach yourself from whether you're right or you're wrong. Don't take a stance about whether it's really the right way or the wrong way. And that can be hard to do when it's something that you're emotionally engaged and involved in. But to try to be more dispassionate and just say, well, let me look at this. Let me give you an example. If I have someone doing surgery on me, say I have to have open heart surgery, I think I want a dispassionate surgeon. I want a surgeon who's passionate about doing things with excellence, who cares about doing things with excellence, but I don't want them overly emotional or emotionally attached. I want them to desire for me to live and to desire for them to do their job with the absolute excellence and to have a great result. And I want them to be entirely focused and in the zone and focused upon doing exactly everything right. I don't want them having their emotions interfering with the task at hand. I want them to separate emotion and logic. I want them to be really logical, really focused, really strategic, working in that portion of the brain that's highly analytical, systematic, and seeking great results. Similarly, you have someone that's taking some kind of risky action, and there's a risk that their life could be on the line and all. They need to really focus in on the task at hand sometimes in order to save someone's life, like a firefighter. If a firefighter is so emotionally overcome by the fear of what could happen or other things like that, that firefighter may not be able to save